I inherited $3.2 million from my late brother. I grabbed my car keys and drove straight home through the afternoon Toronto traffic, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. After 35 years of marriage, Margaret deserved to hear this news first. We could finally take that trip to the Maritimes she'd always dreamed about. Maybe even buy a small cottage in Muskoka. I was practically running up the driveway of our Scarborough bungalow when I heard her voice through the open living room window, sharp and clear in the warm September air. Yes, I understand the process. How long after we get him declared incompetent? 6 months? That's too long. There has to be a faster way. I froze with my key halfway to the lock. My wife was talking to someone, her tone cold and calculated in a way I'd never heard before. This wasn't the woman who'd held my hand through my retirement party last year. This wasn't the woman I'd built a life with. The nursing home in Mississauga will take him. They don't ask questions if the family is paying. Once he's there, I'll have full power of attorney. Then it's just a matter of selling the house and transferring everything before. She stopped talking. I heard papers rustling. My heart was pounding so hard I thought she might hear it through the door. No, Robert doesn't suspect anything. He thinks I'm devoted, thinks I'm here taking care of him while he wastes away watching hockey and working on his vintage car. He has no idea I've been planning this for 3 years. Ever since David moved to Vancouver, actually. Nobody's watching anymore. I stepped back from the door. My legs felt weak. The lawyer's envelope in my jacket pocket suddenly felt like it weighed 100 pounds. $3.2 million. My brother Thomas had left me everything. And my wife, my Margaret, was planning to have me declared mentally incompetent and steal everything we'd built together. I walked back to my car as quietly as I could. My phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. "Where are you? Dinner's almost ready." Her usual message. Her usual pretense of normalcy. I texted back. "Stopped for groceries. Home in 20. I drove to Tim Hortons and sat in the parking lot with a coffee I couldn't drink. I had to think. I had to be smart about this. The Robert who'd walked into that lawyer's office an hour ago would have stormed into the house demanding answers. But that Robert didn't know what I knew now. That Robert didn't understand that the woman he'd loved for 35 years was capable of this level of betrayal. I pulled out the lawyer's letter again. Thomas had died of a heart attack 2 weeks ago in his condo in Yorkville. He'd never married, never had children. He'd poured everything into his construction company, and now it was all mine. The letter explained that the estate included the business, his properties, and his investment portfolio. Total value, $3.2 million. I couldn't tell Margaret. Not now. Maybe not ever. I needed to understand what was happening first. I called my son David in Vancouver. It was 3 hours earlier there, and he picked up on the second ring. "Dad? Is everything okay?" Yeah. I wanted to hear your voice. How's the new job?" We talked for 15 minutes about his software engineering position, his apartment in Kitsilano, his girlfriend Sarah. Normal father-son conversation. But my mind was racing. Margaret had said something about David moving away. About nobody watching anymore. What did that mean? "Dad, you sure you're all right? You sound distracted. Just a long day." "Hey, when was the last time you talked to your mother?" "Oh, I don't know. A week ago? She called to complain about Mrs. Henderson next door again. Same as always. Why? No reason. I love you, son." "Love you too, Dad." I sat there in the Tim Hortons parking lot until it got dark. Then I drove home. Margaret met me at the door, all smiles and concern. "Where have you been?" I was worried sick. "You said 20 minutes. She was wearing the blue cardigan I'd bought her last Christmas. Her gray hair was pulled back in the ponytail she always wore when she was cooking. She looked like my wife. She looked like the woman I'd shared my life with. But all I could see was the woman on that phone call. The woman planning to lock me away. Sorry. Ran into Bob Thompson from the plant. You know how he talks? Well, dinner's cold now. I made shepherd's pie. My favorite. Of course she did. She was good at this. Good at playing the devoted wife, while she planned my destruction. Over the next week, I did something I never thought I'd do. I spied on my own wife. I installed a small recording app on my phone and left it on the kitchen counter when I went out. I checked our bank statements, which I hadn't looked at in months. Margaret had always handled the finances. I trusted her. I drove to the nursing home in Mississauga she'd mentioned and asked about their admission process. "Oh yes," the administrator said, a thin woman with sharp eyes. "Mrs. Thompson was here last week asking about our memory care unit. Is your condition progressing?" "Mrs. Thompson? Your wife? She said you were having episodes. Early-stage dementia." She was very concerned. I felt sick. "Right. Yes. Just gathering information. Thank you." I went home and searched our filing cabinet while Margaret was at her book club. I found folders I'd never seen before. Power of attorney documents, already drawn up, just missing my signature. Consultation notes from a neurologist I'd never visited, documenting memory problems I didn't have. A quote from a real estate agent for selling our house. She'd been building a case, creating a paper trail to prove I was incompetent. And I'd been so wrapped up in my retirement, my projects in the garage, my poker nights with the guys, that I hadn't noticed. The recording app captured another phone call 3 days later. "He's been acting strange. I think he suspects something. We need to move faster." Who was she talking to, I wondered. The voice on the other end was male, muffled, hard to make out. "No, I don't want to wait. I've waited long enough. 35 years of cooking his meals and doing his laundry and pretending to care about his boring stories. I deserve this. We deserve this." There it was. The we. She wasn't alone in this. I enhanced the audio on my computer, something I'd learned from a YouTube video. The male voice became clearer. "Next month, then. After we get the power of attorney signed. Your husband won't know what hit him." I knew that voice. It took me a minute, but then I placed it. Kevin Marsh, our financial advisor. The man we'd trusted with our retirement savings for the past decade. The man who came to our house for dinner every few months. The man whose wife Carol had supposedly died of cancer 2 years ago. I thought I might throw up. I called a lawyer the next morning. Not our family lawyer, a new one. A woman named Patricia Chen who specialized in elder abuse and fraud. "Mr. Thompson, what you're describing is serious. Financial exploitation of a senior. Conspiracy to commit fraud. If you have recordings, documentation, this is a criminal matter." "I don't want her arrested," I said. "I just want to protect myself. Let's start with protecting your assets. Don't mention the inheritance to anyone. We'll set up a trust, make sure everything is secure before she can touch it. Then we deal with the immediate threat." Patricia was thorough. Over the next 2 weeks, we built a case. She hired a private investigator who confirmed what I already knew. Margaret and Kevin were having an affair. They'd been together for at least 2 years. The photographs showed them at a condo in downtown Toronto, one I assumed Kevin owned. They showed them having lunch, holding hands, kissing in parking garages. Each photo felt like a knife to my chest. Not because I still loved her. That love had died the moment I heard her voice through the window. But because I'd been such a fool, I'd trusted her completely. I'd given her access to everything, and she'd been planning to destroy me. "There's more," the investigator said during our meeting in Patricia's office. "Kevin Marsh has done this before. 3 years ago, a widowed client accused him of stealing from her accounts. The case was settled out of court. He kept his license, but had to pay restitution. Why wasn't he stopped? The financial industry regulates itself. As long as he paid the money back, he could keep working. Your wife likely doesn't know about his history. Or maybe she did and didn't care. Patricia created a strategy. We're going to beat her at her own game. We'll document everything. We'll make sure your inheritance is protected in an irrevocable trust. We'll expose the affair and the fraud. And then we'll give her a choice. Accept a fair divorce settlement or face criminal charges. I don't want to be vindictive. Mr. Thompson, this woman was planning to have you locked away in a nursing home so she could steal your assets. This isn't vindictive. This is justice. The inheritance came through officially on a Tuesday in October. I signed all the papers at Patricia's office. The $3.2 million went directly into a trust fund with Patricia as the trustee. Margaret would never see a penny of it. Everything was divided according to Ontario law. The house we'd bought together would be sold and split 50-50. Our joint savings would be divided. But the inheritance was mine alone, protected. That evening, I asked Margaret to sit down with me in the living room. We need to talk. She looked nervous. She'd been nervous for a few days now. Maybe she sensed something was wrong. What about? I pulled out a folder. I know about Kevin. I know about your plan to have me declared incompetent. I know about the nursing home. I know everything. The color drained from her face. Robert, I can explain? Don't. Please don't insult me by lying now. I slid the folder across the coffee table. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside were copies of the recordings, transcripts of her phone calls, photographs of her and Kevin, the fake medical documents, everything. I've already filed for divorce. You'll be served papers tomorrow. You have two choices. Accept a fair settlement, or I go to the police with evidence of fraud and elder abuse. Your choice. She started crying. Robert, please. It wasn't supposed to be like this. We were struggling financially. And Kevin said, we weren't struggling. We have $80,000 in savings, and both our pensions. You just wanted more. I gave you my whole life, and I gave you mine. The difference is, I honored my vows. She stood up, suddenly angry. You think you're so perfect. You've been boring me for years. Coming home, sitting in front of the TV, working on that stupid car in the garage. Do you know how suffocating it is to be married to someone who has no ambition, no drive? Kevin understands me. He sees me. Kevin is using you. He's done this before. He's a con artist who targets lonely women with access to money. That's not true. I showed her the investigator's report about Kevin's history. She read it slowly, her face changing as she realized what I was saying was true. You're lying. This is fake. You made this up to turn me against him. Call him right now. Ask him about Mrs. Patricia Walsh from Etobicoke. Ask him about the $140,000 he stole from her and had to pay back 3 years ago. She grabbed her phone and dialed. I watched her face as she spoke to Kevin, as he clearly denied everything, as she started to doubt. The call ended abruptly. He hung up on me. He knows it's over. He knows you're not useful to him anymore. She collapsed back onto the couch. What have I done? You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. The divorce took 4 months. Margaret tried to fight for part of the inheritance at first, but Patricia shut that down quickly. The inheritance came after separation. It's not marital property. And even if it was, your fraud and conspiracy would negate any claim you might have. In the end, Margaret got half the house sale and half our joint savings. About $220,000. Not the millions she'd been planning to steal, but enough to start over if she was smart about it. I bought a smaller house in North York, closer to David, who flew home twice during the divorce to support me. We spent hours talking, rebuilding the relationship that had grown distant over the years. Dad, I need to tell you something, he said during one visit. Mom called me about 6 months ago. She said you were having memory problems. She said she was worried about you and asked if I'd support her decision to put you in a care home if it got worse. What did you say? I told her that if you were having problems, we'd deal with it as a family, that we'd get you the best care possible, but you'd never go somewhere you didn't want to be. She got angry with me, said I didn't understand how hard it was for her. That's actually why I stopped calling as much. She made me feel guilty for not being there to help her. She was manipulating you. I know that now. I'm sorry I didn't see it. Neither did I, son. Neither did I. Kevin Marsh lost his financial advisor license. The investigator's evidence, combined with my complaint to the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario, was enough to trigger a full investigation. They found other victims, other women he'd taken advantage of. He'd been running this con for years. Margaret moved to a small apartment in Scarborough. I heard through mutual friends that she was working part-time at a grocery store, trying to make her settlement money last. Kevin had disappeared from her life the moment the investigation started. I, on the other hand, started to rebuild. Thomas's construction company came with a solid management team who'd been running things smoothly. They didn't need me to interfere. But I did something Thomas never had. I started a scholarship fund for young people from low-income families who wanted to pursue trades. Electricians, plumbers, carpenters, The jobs that built our cities but were often overlooked. We'll call it the Thomas Thompson Memorial Scholarship. I told the board I'd assembled to manage it. My brother believed in hard work and giving people opportunities. Let's honor that. I funded it with $500,000 from the inheritance. It would support 20 students a year, covering their tuition and tools. I also did something for myself. I joined a vintage car club and started taking my 1967 Mustang to shows across Ontario. I met people. I made friends. I started living instead of just existing. One evening, about 8 months after the divorce was finalized, I was having dinner with David and Sarah at a restaurant in the Annex. David had proposed, and they were planning a wedding for the following summer. Dad, Sarah, and I were talking. We want you to walk her down the aisle too. Her father passed away, and we thought it would be nice if you could be there for both of us. I felt tears in my eyes. I'd be honored. Sarah squeezed my hand. You've been more of a parent to me in the past year than anyone else. The way you handled everything with grace and dignity, even when you could have been bitter and angry. That's who I want in my life. That's who I want my kids to know as their grandfather. I couldn't speak for a moment. I thought about Margaret's voice through that window. I thought about how close I'd come to losing everything. Not the money. That didn't matter. But my dignity, my autonomy, my relationship with my son. You know what the strangest part is? I said finally. I'm grateful it happened. What do you mean? David asked. If I hadn't inherited that money, if I hadn't come home at that exact moment, I would have walked into her trap. I would have ended up in that nursing home, drugged and confused, while she and Kevin lived off my assets. The inheritance didn't just give me financial security, it gave me back my life. David nodded slowly. And you handled it perfectly. You didn't lash out. You didn't get revenge. You just protected yourself and moved on. Your grandmother used to say that living well is the best revenge. I didn't understand what she meant until now. Margaret wanted to lock me away because she thought I was boring, because I had no ambition. But I was content. I was happy working on my car and watching hockey and having dinner with my family. She saw that as weakness. I see it now as strength. Sarah smiled. And now you're funding scholarships and showing your car at exhibitions and planning your son's wedding. You're not just living well, you're thriving. She was right. I was thriving. A year after the divorce, I sold Thomas's construction company to the management team for a fair price. They'd built it into something even more successful than he had. With the proceeds added to what was left of the inheritance, I had more money than I'd ever need. I established the Thompson Family Foundation, focusing on elder abuse prevention and financial literacy for seniors. I spoke at community centers across Ontario about what had happened to me, about the warning signs, about the importance of staying engaged and aware even after retirement. I was lucky, I told audiences. I found out before it was too late, but thousands of seniors across Canada aren't so lucky. They're isolated, vulnerable, and trusting. And there are people who prey on that trust. We need to talk about this. We need to protect each other. The foundation funded legal services for seniors facing financial abuse. We created workshops on power of attorney and estate planning. We trained healthcare workers and social workers to recognize the signs of exploitation. Margaret reached out once, about 18 months after the divorce. She sent a letter to my lawyer's office. Patricia called to ask if I wanted to read it. What does it say? She apologizes. She says she was wrong. She says she's been going to therapy and realizes now that she was unhappy with herself, not with you. She asks if there's any possibility of reconciliation. What do you think I should do? That's not for me to say, Robert. But I will tell you this. In my 20 years of practice, I've seen a lot of people who are sorry they got caught. Very few who are genuinely remorseful. The difference is that genuinely remorseful people don't ask for anything. They apologize and accept the consequences. People who are sorry they got caught try to negotiate. She's asking to reconcile. Exactly. I never responded to the letter. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. And I didn't want to rebuild this one. I'd moved on. I'd found peace. David and Sarah's wedding was beautiful. A small ceremony in Muskoka, right on the lake, surrounded by pine trees and love. I walked Sarah down the aisle, and I stood beside my son as his best man. I gave a speech about second chances and new beginnings, and the family we choose. Margaret wasn't there. David had invited her, but she declined. I don't think I could face everyone, she told him. At least she had that much self-awareness. As I watched David and Sarah exchange vows, I thought about my own wedding 36 years ago, the promises Margaret and I had made, the future we'd planned. All of it had been real for me. Maybe it had been real for her too, at first. But somewhere along the way, she'd changed. Or maybe I'd never really known her at all. It didn't matter anymore. What mattered was this. I was free. I was healthy. I was surrounded by people who loved me. I was making a difference in other people's lives. I was, at 63 years old, finally living on my own terms. The inheritance from Thomas hadn't just given me money. It had given me a choice, and I'd chosen myself. I'd chosen dignity over bitterness. I'd chosen building over destroying. I'd chosen to turn a moment of devastating betrayal into an opportunity for growth. Some people might say I was too soft on Margaret, that I should have pressed charges, sent her to jail, taken everything. But that wouldn't have given me peace. It would have just kept me tied to her, trapped in anger and resentment. Instead, I let karma do its work. Kevin was disgraced and banned from his profession. Margaret lost her marriage, her home, her comfortable life. She had to live every day knowing that her greed and betrayal had cost her everything. That was punishment enough. As for me, I had a son who loved me, a daughter-in-law who respected me, and grandchildren on the way who would know their grandfather as a man of integrity. I had a foundation that was changing lives. I had friends and purpose and peace. I had won, not because I'd destroyed my enemy, but because I'd refused to become one. And on summer evenings, I still work on my 1967 Mustang in my garage. But now, it's not an escape. It's a joy. I'm not hiding from a life I don't want. I'm living the life I chose. That window, that moment when I heard Margaret's voice plotting my destruction, was the worst moment of my life. But it was also a gift. It showed me who she really was before she could destroy me. It gave me the chance to save myself. And I took it, not with revenge or cruelty, but with strategy and dignity. I played her game better than she did. I protected what was mine. I moved forward. That's the real victory. Not the money, not the house, not even the satisfying knowledge that justice was served. The real victory is knowing that I'm still here, still myself, still living with integrity and purpose. Margaret tried to take that from me. She failed. And I'll spend the rest of my life grateful that I was given the chance to fight